It's so interesting how every single week, whenever Rabbi Yehuda says, it dovetails into what we're talking about today. Every week. And it's so interesting also, I saw this many, many years ago, and I pointed it out to one of the people that I'm very close to, and he says, yeah, if you're learning any sefer, and you're really, really learning L'Shem Shemayim, the times that are happening in the course of the year are going to reflect on what you're learning. You see, everyone sees it. It blows you away. So it so happens that, what's tonight? Tonight's Tu B'Av. And what are we talking about in Talmud Devorah today? We're talking about relationships. We're talking about the love relationship that Bnei Yisrael has with Hashem, and then we have with each other. We're going to be talking about love today. The deepest love, the sweetest love. Isn't it interesting that the word for love in Ivrit, ahava, is the same gematria as echad, one. Echad is aleph ches daled, which comes to 13, and ahava is aleph hey beis hey, which is also 13. They're both the same. And this is what the whole idea of the 13 attributes of mercy, the higher attributes of mercy, are all about. They're all about the tremendous love that we want to have with Hashem, and Hashem wants to have with us. And that's what we're going through right now. Now, isn't it also interesting, we're in the middle of 2 months now, 2 months of love. And I'm not talking about Woodstock. The 2 months of love are Menachem Av and Elul. Menachem Av. We call it Menachem Av because Menachem means a father who is comforting us. Now, a lot of people in the audience, I'm sure, have, when you say your loving father, the nose goes up in the air and, ew, my father, he was so cruel, he beat me up. He divorced my mom, he left me with nothing. He showed up at my wedding and that was the only time I saw him for the next 50 years. I hear stories of this all the time. But Adam, as we've spoken before, Adam Rishon didn't have parents. Adam Rishon only had Hashem. And Hashem was his father. And Hashem, as we said, and we're going to talk about in a few minutes again, Hashem, when he gave the Torah, he appeared like a Zeta, overflowing with kindness. In Gan Eden, Hashem was for Adam and for Chava a loving father, an Av Menachem, and Menachem Av, a loving father. And so, what is the relationship that a father has with his child? Whether there's a loving relationship or not, there is a genetic relationship. There is something which you can't avoid. I come from that person. Whether I like him or not, I come from him. I'm part of him. I'm from him. So that's the month of Av. Av is all about how, whether we alienate our father and he drives us out of his house, not only does he drive us out of his house, but even more so, we caused it by driving him out of our hearts. That make for me a sanctuary and I'll dwell within them. In other words, not a building. Make yourself into a vessel and I'll be there for you. And that's what Av is all about, resensitizing ourselves and opening up that vessel so that Hashem can dwell within us. That's what the month of Av is all about. Mishenichnas Av mematim besimcha, the Gemara says in Tainus. that as the month of Av comes in, we lessen simcha, because the simcha we're thinking about is our own selfish simcha. And we need to be able to make ourselves a dwelling place for Hashem so that we have this incredible, deep inner simcha. And we come to Tisha B'Av, and Tisha B'Av was supposed to be a yontif, but instead, the Meraglim came along and said, I can't deal with this. We can't conquer Eretz Yisrael. Hashem is lying to us. Hashem isn't really with us. And what comes after is that the entire generation those between the ages of 20 and 60, except for the Levium, they all die. And the Gemara tells us that every year on Tisha B'Av, the Jewish people would all dig graves for themselves. Scary, creepy. And they'd all lie down at night. And that entire generation, one by one, year by year, where they would all die until the 40th year. And in the 40th year, they went and lied down, those that were left. And they woke up the next morning, everything was fine. They did it the same next day. On Tu B'Av, they realized that there's no more dying. This is a time of living. And isn't it interesting how the Chochmah and Nistar point out that when the Mashiach comes, Mashiach is supposed to be born in Tisha B'Av, but we're going to have another 7-day Yontif. Tisha B'Av is going to be the first day of the Yontif, and Tu B'Av is going to be the last day of the Yontif. It's going to be the culmination. It's going to be the Hoshana Rabbah. It's going to be the Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's going to be the Simchas Torah. No, Simchas Torah is the day after. That's the 8th day. It's a different Yontif. It's going to be the Kriyas Yam Suf. It's going to be Yishal Pesach. It's an incredible, incredible day. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So before we actually get to that, let's learn a little bit of Timer Devorah. The beginning of the 4th of the Midas. So take one, pass it around. Here we go. So listen to how the 4th Midah begins. Talking about relationships. Here. The 4th Midah is called L'She'eris Nahalato. She'er can be a remnant, but it also can be a relative. And so the Talmud Devorah is going to tell us that Hashem is related to us. We are blood relatives with Hashem. And we're going to be His ultimate heritage. The rest of the world is going to fall by the wayside. They say that there's a famous, everyone knows this, Kapitel Tilim, Az Yamali Schog Pinu, that in the time of Mashiach, the Yidden are going to laugh at the Goyim, because the Goyim are going to have these incredible insights. And the Yidden are going to say, we knew that already.
It's happening with science now.
That's right. And we're going to laugh. That's the schok. So we ultimately are going to be Hashem's inheritance. We're going to be not his inheritance, not his Yerusha, his Nachala. We're going to establish a heritage for him. So let's see what it says. I think we have another one here. You can't tell the players without a program. Let's see. Here. There we go. Okay. This is how Hashem relates to the Jewish people. Omer, ma'aseh Yisrael. What can I do for Yisrael? V'hem karoivai. They're my relatives. She'er busar. They are of the same flesh as me. What does that mean? Hashem has flesh? No. He's talking about how we say in all of us there is a nefesh elokah mimal. We have a godly soul inside of all of us. And that godly soul is also part of Hashem. So in a spiritual sense, we are part of Hashem's flesh. Shehem bezug, hem bazug l'kodesh baruch hu. We are Hashem's shidduch. V'korei la biti achoisi imi. And he calls them my daughter, my sister, my mother. Kedever shazal, as it's explained in the Medrash. So let's take a moment and look at that Medrash. But before we do, I want to tell you a story about love. So here's the Medrash. It's from, actually it's the Gemara, and underneath we're going to be talking about the Medrash. So the Gemara says, no, before I tell you that, we had a lovely couple over for Shabbos this past week. And they also happened to be patients. Now it so happens whenever I have a new patient, I have them fill out a very, very long intake form. And one of the things I ask is, how would you qualify your relationship with your spouse? On a scale of 1 to 10. And they answered 8.5. Great relationship. But when we got a little bit deeper, it turned out that really the two of them had a wonderful coexisting life. He would do his work, he'd bring home money, she would go to all her classes, her chaburas. She was constantly attending classes. And it came out during the course of the meal that he resented it. And he said something that was really quite profound. And those of you women who are listening in, please take it in the right spirit, because it's meant not as a criticism, but as an observation, a self-observation, a mirror look into yourself. He said that all of these shiurim that my wife is attending, and all these classes, and all these chaburas, are destroying the fabric of marriages. Whoa. How could that be? We're growing. No, you don't understand. If a woman is doing that which is to develop herself, quote unquote, spiritually, but she is neglecting her relationship with her husband or neglecting the relationship with her children, and the house is a mess, she has it backwards. The man is supposed to be chesed, and the woman is supposed to be Devorah. Devorah doesn't mean strong and hard, doesn't mean tight-stringed. It means orderly. It means with structure. And if a man is being very tight with his wife, he's not doing his job. He needs to give his wife whatever she needs, giving her the boundaries and guidance again to help her tend this nest in order for her to grow and feel safe. When a woman feels safe, then the pasuk is able to fulfill through her what we need to know, that a man's honor and a man's wealth comes from his wife. When he gives her respect, when he makes her feel like $1 million. When the wife feels like she is constrained, criticized, put down, that's when she runs away to classes. So ladies, when you have these classes, of course you need to grow, but use the classes, use the brilliance, use the guidance and the love that you get to make a home better, to be a better wife. Isn't it interesting how when we do a mitzvah, the Arizal and all the tzaddikim tell us that we should say before we do a mitzvah, L'shem yichud kudsha shechinte, b'dechilu urechimu v'dechilu, that we're doing what we're doing, this mitzvah, to bring a unification, to make a shidduch, to make a oneness. How are we doing it? B'dechilu, with fear, with awe, urechimu, isn't it interesting how the word that's used for love in Aramaic is the word for compassion in Hebrew? Because love means thinking about someone else. This is the echad we were talking about. And so we have to be able to always consider if we have the best interest of our partner in mind as we develop. So what better time to talk about love and relationships than Tu B'Av? Tonight is Tu B'Av. So let's learn the Gemara on Tu B'Av. It's a Gemara on Daf, and Tainis Daf Chof Vav. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. So Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Lo hayu yamim tovim liYisrael kechamisha asar ba'av v'kiyom kippurim. There were no happier days for Israel when the Beis Hamikdash was around than Tu B'Av and the Yom Kippur. Shebahem b'nai Yisrael yotzais b'kli lavan shulim. That on those days, the daughters of Yerushalayim would go out in white. What color did the Kohen Gadol wear on Yom Kippur? White. And the Jewish woman would also wear white on Yom Kippur and on Tu B'Av. And it's also interesting, you look in the note in the bottom, there's a halacha that says a man is supposed to buy for his wife on Yom Tov beautiful colored clothing. But not here. Because this is a different dimension. This is a Mashiach dimension. What is the white all about? It's about purity. And they would also have to have borrowed clothes. And the Gemara says that the Kohen Gadol, his daughter, would give her clothes to someone else, and the Melech's wife, a daughter, would give to her, and all the people in Israel would have borrowed clothes. And interestingly, when were the first clothes worn? In Gan Eden. And what's the word for clothing? Levush, or beged. And look at those words. We'll see some profound thoughts relative to that. Levush is from the same word as lo bush. No bizyonis, no embarrassment. And beged is from the same root as bagad. Ashanu bagadnu, betrayal. So in other words, we need to go back to the beginning, before the sin. And on Yom Kippur and Tu B'Av, in Mirz Hashem, at this time of Mashiach, we're going to go back in time to this place where there's no betrayal, where no one looks at the colored clothes or the beautiful clothes. And even if a woman is dressed in a tznius way, if she attracts attention to herself, it's a betrayal to her husband. Lo bush. Not only that, but all the garment, let's see what the Gemara says. Kol kalim. And again, levush from the other levush. There would be no embarrassments for someone who didn't have clothes. That's why we chose the lowest common denominator. Everyone have white clothes. Whether they're the richest, most powerful, most influential women in the world, in all of Eretz Yisrael, or a poor maid. And they would all be borrowed. V'chol ha'kelim tu'udim tefillah. And whether a woman was ritually pure or not, all the women had to toivel their clothes in the mikveh. U'b'nais Yisrael ya'itzos v'cholos b'kramim. And all the daughters of Yerushalayim would go out and they would dance in the vineyards. It's interesting. One of the opinions of the Gemara and the Medrash as to what the Eitz Hadas was is grapes. So again, the Benos Yisrael are saying, we want to identify with the sin that our Alta Baba Chava did by eating from grapes and suddenly having this awareness, having this knowledge, having seen things and having been aware of things that we didn't have before, which were terribly, which caused all kinds of problems for us. V'cholos, it doesn't say meraktos, it says v'cholos, and they would dance. What's the root of the word cholos? Mechila. They would want to do mechila. They'd want to get forgiveness from Hashem for creating the schism that happened. Maya Amras, and what would they say? Bocher, sano enecho rei mata boerlach. Bocher. Women are the girls are dancing in the vineyards, and they're saying Bocher, sano enecho. Where do we have that phrase, sano enecha? Yiso Hashem panav elecho. In the Birchas Kohanim, we're asking Hashem to look down upon us. So here, what is the special bracha that a woman says every day? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam she'asani kirtzonai. So the Mefarshim tell us she'asani kirtzonai is not a concession, but really that I, as a woman, am doing the ratzon of Hashem. What is the word for an evil man? It's a rasha. What's the word for an evil woman? It's a mirshas. It's a woman who transforms her basic nature, which is good and pure, to be evil. A woman's nature is ultimately good. Women are the pinnacle of creation. They're the highest form of creation. And so the women are saying, Bocherim, lift up your eyes as you look at me and see what you choose for yourself. Al titein einecho lenoi benoi. Don't look at, what is a noi? Where do we have that word noi? An ornament. We put schach in the sukkah, we have noi. What is a noi referring to? It's talking about superficial beauty. Don't look at superficial beauty. Tein einecho b'mishpocha. But rather look at family lineage. Look at a girl who's been raised to be a God-fearing girl. That's who you should want to connect with. That's who your relationship should be with. Sheker achein vehevel hayofi isha yiras Hashem hisalo. Because that's what makes a woman special, by being God-fearing. You know, a lot of girls who feel very bad about themselves, they dress in a manner which is basically saying, look at me, look at my endowments. And all they're essentially saying is they don't feel good about themselves. Because if a girl felt good about herself, she'd realize that she really is so very close to Hashem. And the way you get closer to Hashem is by not making yourself a street person. Is showing that you are in awe of Hashem's presence, that Hashem is always around you. So, therefore, Tenu lami priyadeha, bihaliyah. So, give her the fruits of her hands, meaning what she does is more important than who she is or what she looks like. Bihalu b'sharim masech, so that her deeds are what you'd praise. V'cheinu omar. And now we're going to get back to Talmud Devorah. Because it also says in Shir HaShirim, Tzena arena b'nois tzion, b'melech shloime b'atar shitla imoy. Go out and see, daughters of Tzion, the crown that rests on the head of King Shlomo, that his mother put on his head on his wedding day. Whoa. That's a pasuk from Shir HaShirim. Who cares about the crown that his mother put on his head on his wedding day? But no. We have to understand that Shir HaShirim is all allegory. It's all metaphor. And when it talks about Shlomo, it's not talking about Shlomo Melech. It's talking about Melech Shalom Shaloi, the king who is perfect, who has everything. And what does the Gemara continue and say? Ba'atara shirit lo imoy, b'yom chasanusay, b'yom simchas liboy. What is the day of his chasna referring to? B'yom chasanusay is a matan Torah. That's the chasna between Hashem and the Jewish people. And that's this relationship we're talking about. Uvayom simchas liboy, in the day of his heart's rejoicing, it's a binyan beis hamikdash b'mehera yimenu. That's the day of the building of the beis hamikdash. So, if we look at these psukim, we can come to understand that there's much, much more than just meets the eye. That Jewish women are on a much higher madrega. They're much closer to Hashem than men are. So, so what does it mean, Va'atara shitra lo imai? What is this crown that his mommy put on his head? So turn the page to the other side, if you have the papers. And let's look at Shir Hashirim, the Medrash on Shir Hashirim, Rabba Gimel. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shal Rab Shimon bar Yochai es Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi was one of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's big Talmidim. And one day, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai runs into his son, Rabbi Elazar, not Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, Rabbi Elazar ben Yosi, and he says to him, Efshar sheshamata me'aviv ma'u atar shit lo imoi? Did you maybe hear from your father a taich, an explanation of this very, very strange and oblique phrase, this crown that his mother crowned him on his wedding day? Amar lo hein? Yep. Amar lo heich? Tell me. Amar lo, and he said to him, derech hamashal, he said to him by way of a metaphor. This is Rav Elazar ben Yosi talking to the Heilige Rav Shimon bar Yochai. Imagine this scene. There once was a king who had an only daughter. And he loved her more than anything in the whole world. It's an interesting lashon. He loved her more than was normal. And he didn't know what to call his daughter because he loved her so much. He called her Bati, my precious daughter. No. It wasn't good enough. He said, no, I want to call you my daughter, my sister. No, that's not enough. Imi, mommy. And that, says Rav Elazar ben Rav Yosi, is the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for the Jewish people.
His mother?
Yes. The crown that he gave her on the day of Matan Torah. Karlan Biti. Let's see. Amad Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai v'nashka al Raishi. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai heard this from Rabbi Yosi, from Rav Elazar Rabbi Yosi, and he kissed him on the head. V'amar Iloi basi ela lishmoya mimcha mepicho hatam azeh dayu. Just to hear you say that made my day. And that's exactly, going back to the time of Devorah, how Hashem looks at us. His love for us is so passionate and so overwhelming and so unlimited that he doesn't have words to describe us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have words, but he uses these descriptive adjectives to make us feel how much he loves us. So now with that introduction, let's go back and see where we left off. And that's what it means, share Nahalato, that we are related to Hashem. that we are Bas Zugla Kodesh Baruch Hu. We are the Shidduch of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. V'korei la, and he calls Klal Yisrael, Biti, my daughter, Achaisi, my sister, Imi, my mommy. Hashem loves us so much. It's in modern Hebrew slang, when somebody in the family is talking to a male or a female, what is an Israeli mother? How does she relate to her in a loving manner, or relate to him in a loving manner? Imale. This is the Imale. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is referring to Klal Yisrael as Imale. I love you. Get a parish as we explain. We say that in the famous kapitel that we say when we bring out the Sefer Torah on Shabbos. Yisrael am karoivai, that Yisrael is a nation who's related to me. Mamish kurva yesh lo imoyim, ubanavhem. We are related to Hashem and we are His children. Hainu l'she'eris nachalasoi. And we are sher bosar. We are actually related to Him. And we are His nachala. Now, nachala is a very interesting term. There are two words that usually describe an inheritance. There's a Yerusha and there's a Nachla. A Yerusha is what you get in your will. A Nachla means a heritage. There's a fascinating Ramban that talks about our relationship with Hashem. The Ramban says that Hashem has His own special Chassidim. Who are Hashem's Chassidim? That when the Chassid will call out to Hashem, help me, Hashem will do whatever He wants. How could it be? Double standard? And yet by the same time we know that when somebody's in trouble, you say Tillim for him. You daven for your heart, you open up your heart and you scream, Eibishter, Tata Ziza, help me. And Hashem will help us. We say it because we know Hashem will help us. But when we, says the Ramban, when we make ourselves so connected to Hashem that we think about Him all the time, and we want to please Him by everything we do, and we don't compartmentalize our lives and separate our lives and do things differently when we feel we're not around Him, then Hashem is with us, and Hashem responds to us. And those people who do that truly are Hashem's Chassidim. It's true. And at a time, there's an old expression, there are no atheists in foxholes. When somebody has rockets flying over their heads, suddenly the most irreligious person will call to Hashem. And so, yes, when we feel that we're in trouble, when stuff happens, we start to realize that maybe Hashem is giving us a message. It's true. We'll reach out to Hashem and Hashem will answer us. But the Ramban says it's really a shame. Because if we would think about Hashem every single moment that we could possibly do it, when we see something that's distasteful, we look away. Because it's not just distasteful to us, and it's not that we're afraid of sin, but we are in awe of Hashem's presence being with us all the time. And so how can I be with this incredibly wonderful, wonderful God who loves me? Oh, we talked about Av. What about Elul? That's the other kind of relationship we have. Not only do we have this relationship whereby we are genetically connected to Hashem, Sher Basar, but we're also in love with Hashem. And if I was walking down the street with my lover, with my wife, with my closest friend, with the one who I want to develop a deep relationship with, and I would look where I shouldn't look, I might get afraid. I might be afraid that she noticed that I looked where I shouldn't have looked, and she'll hit me or she'll scream at me. But if I really loved her, I would find it distasteful to look where I shouldn't be looking, because I would basically be disconnecting myself from her. And that's what the Ramban is teaching us, and that's what the month of Elul is all about. Forming an embrace, a constant connection and love relationship with the person who I love, who's Hashem. And that's why Hashem gives us husbands and wives and lovers. Because we can see in that relationship how we can relate to Hashem. It's very hard to understand a relationship unless you have something tangible in front of you. But that's what Ani V'Dodi V'Dodi Li is all about. That's what removing the klipa from our hearts, Umal Hashem es levavcha, levav zarach, is all about. Feeling Hashem's closeness to us and wanting to please Him and wanting to be close to Him so we can become one of Hashem's chassidim. One of those people who Hashem can look down and say, I love you because you love me. Love is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And going back to Tu B'Av a minute, all this entire very surreal scene, this isn't Sadie Hawkins' day. This isn't a time when girls get dressed up and like in a cartoon, boys choose them and girls are making themselves attractive. No. We're told that in the time when the Mashiach will be here, like it was in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, that girls will sensitize and refine themselves and boys will also. And they'll look up to Hashem as Hashem looks down on them. And they'll choose someone who is their perfect mate. The mate who will make them whole and from whom beautiful generations of holy souls will come. And what's very interesting is the Ben Ish Chai tells us in Ben Yehoyada, why does it specifically mention the metaphor of a grapevine? What's unique about grapevine?